A road rage incident turns a young British couple's journey home from the pub into a setup for an American slasher movie.
We were just followed and chased.
And the ending was truly horrifying.
It wasn't just one stab to the heart, it was 37 stab wounds.
Here was a road rage incident which had ended up in a murder.
With few clues and no leads, police turned to the grief-stricken survivor, who made a touching appeal for her fiancé's killer.
And all I want to say is, please, you're the driver of the car, just come forward.
The campaign the police launched was huge, and seemed they were drawing a blank. Nothing or no one seemed to fit.
But when the pieces of the puzzle finally started falling into place, investigators began to wonder just whose rage had left a young man dead on the roadside.
They got angry, and of course that anger blazed.
December 2nd, 1996. At 3:20 a.m., Maureen and Ray Harvey were awakened by a car pulling up outside their home in the suburbs of Birmingham, England. Maureen assumed it was her son Lee.
I heard a car pull up outside, and at first I thought, oh, here we go again.
The 25-year-old frequently came back to his parents' house after fights with his fiancée.
The couple were often splitting up. Lee would often leave and come back again, and it was quite a regular pattern.
But the car outside wasn't Lee's.
I woke my husband and I said, there's a police car outside, and then basically they asked if we were the parents of Lee Harvey, and just somebody was screaming, and it's obviously me.
The police told the Harveys that Lee and his fiancée Tracy Andrews had been assaulted as they drove home from the local pub. Only it was no ordinary assault, according to what Tracy had told detectives at the scene.
They said that there'd been a road rage.
You have this good-looking young lady driving home with her fiancé, and somebody races him down the road, pulls in front of him and stabs him.
It was a mother's worst fear come true.
I said, but he's not dead, he's not dead. And the lady policeman, she just put her arms around me, and that was the answer.
Tracy had also been injured, but not critically.
They said, oh, she has got injuries and like that she's been treated in hospital.
And that's when Lee's dad asked a question, one the police were still trying to answer themselves.
Why would somebody stab Lee and leave her alive as a witness?
When Tracy Andrews and Lee Harvey met in a Birmingham nightclub in October 1994, the attraction was instantaneous.
She was young and glamorous, and Lee was also young and glamorous.
But the connection between the 26-year-old barmaid and the 24-year-old bus conductor was more than just a casual hookup.
Straight in, they were madly in love, wouldn't leave each other alone, and obviously it was the sex. And, and it was like they couldn't get enough of each other.
Tracy hit it off with Lee's mom, Maureen, right away.
Within 20 minutes of meeting her, I thought, what a lovely looking girl.
Maureen also sensed something else beneath Tracy's lovely looks.
She was very insecure about herself, and I couldn't understand why. But then she went on to tell me her life story.
When Tracy was about 8, her father just literally got up and walked out the door, never to return.
Her mother had later remarried, and while she got along with her stepfather, Tracy told Maureen she had never gotten over her father's betrayal.
It obviously scarred her, and she was very hurt.
She wasn't, however, afraid of commitment.
She wanted to settle down and get married and have a family.
And that made Tracy, in Maureen's initial opinion, a good match for her son.
He'd got no ambition of being something special. He just wanted to be a father and a husband and have a family life.
Within weeks, Lee was spending most of his time at Tracy's flat in Alvechurch, a village just outside of Birmingham. Within months, he was spending all of his time there.
It moves in quite quickly with Tracy. It was a matter of a few months.
However, settling down didn't dampen Lee and Tracy's intense relationship.
It was fiery, certainly passionate, but sometimes that passion would spill into, maybe unpleasantness.
According to Lee's mother, Maureen, the unpleasantness started when Tracy's passion for Lee turned possessive.
She was very demanding. She wanted to know everything about where he was, and she'd want to know every detail of his day.
Lee could be just as jealous of Tracy, often accusing her of flirting with other men.
There was a lot of jealousy on both sides. They had very heated arguments.
There were episodes where the police were sent for at the house or the flat where they were living together.
More often than not, the fights ended with Lee packing up and moving back to his parents' house, a development that suited his mother just fine.
His personality, I could see it changing, which I didn't like, and I did warn him. And I phoned her, and I told her that I wasn't happy the way she was changing my son.
Lee could never stay away from Tracy for long, though.
They had their ups and downs, lots of breakups, lots of screaming and shouting, and then lots of passionate making up.
Then in May of 1995, after 7 months of angry breakups and passionate reconciliations, Lee attempted to put their volatile relationship on a more permanent footing.
He proposed to her and gave the ring. He popped the ring on a finger.
Tracy said yes, but it soon became clear that an engagement ring hadn't changed much about Tracy and Lee's routine.
They kept saying, oh yes, we're going to get married, and then they'd have a very violent row, split up, and then they'd be back together again.
I warned her and him about it, and I said, you're heading for disaster.
By August 1996, the couple had been engaged off and on for over a year, with no wedding in sight. Then Tracy made an announcement that seemed to change everything.
She's come in and she said that she was expecting, and that they were thrilled and whatever, and I'm thinking, oh dear, that's it now then, if there's a baby on the way.
But barely a week had passed before Lee was back at his parents' house after yet another fight with Tracy. The separation was as short-lived as always, only it wasn't passion that brought Lee and Tracy back together this time.
She was shopping and she come down some steps and she fell, and that's when she had the miscarriage.
Tracy told Lee about the miscarriage just days after he'd walked out.
He was very upset and he was concerned about that, and he kept saying, oh, we can try for another one.
Tracy appeared equally devastated. That is, until Lee came up with a way to boost both their spirits.
He'd paid for a breast enhancement surgery.
A month after the loss of the baby, Tracy had new breasts and a new self-confidence.
She's come to dinner. The clothes were very low, because obviously she wants to show off her new boobs. And she's got my husband's hand without him not knowing. And she's placed it on her breast and she says, feel that.
But it was when she and Lee went out that Tracy's exhibitionism really expressed itself.
She started getting onto the dance floor and dancing and sort of like enticing the men. And she'd just stand and dance on her own, and because she wanted people to see her the way she moved.
But with Tracy flaunting her new assets everywhere they went, it didn't take long for Lee's jealousy to resurface.
Obviously, Lee would get upset about it. What man wouldn't? Doesn't want his girlfriend or the woman he's going to marry performing like that, so it caused problems.
But would it also cause a murder? On the evening of December 1st, 1996, Tracy and Lee headed down to the local pub for drinks. And Tracy, as usual, made sure she turned all the men's heads as soon as she walked into the room.
She was very noticeable. Black leather jacket, black leather trousers.
And just hours later, police would be wondering just who had noticed Tracy in the pub that night. Around 10:45 p.m., a local man made a gruesome discovery on the isolated stretch of road outside his girlfriend's country cottage.
He heard some noises in the road outside. He went to the garden gate. He saw Tracy in a distressed and blood-stained condition.
She was discovered standing by the car and with Lee on the ground, already dead.
The man took Tracy inside the cottage and called the police. When the first officers arrived, they found Lee's body in the road, lying in a pool of blood.
2 uniformed police constables attended the scene. They could see what it was. Mr. Harvey was already deceased.
Tracy was inside the cottage covered in Lee's blood and shaken by what had just happened. However, Tracy did manage to tell the officers that shortly after she and Lee left the pub, a car with 2 men inside had started to follow them.
This vehicle allegedly came up behind Lee Harvey's vehicle, flashing its lights, blowing its horn. There was some shouting.
Eventually, according to Tracy, the other car pulled in front, forcing them to stop. Lee and the other driver had jumped out and started arguing. Tracy said she got out to help Lee, but the other driver had knocked her to the ground.
She's got a black eye, she's got bruises, she's covered in blood.
Then Tracy said the passenger of the other car got out and struck Lee several times.
She thought they were punches, she said initially.
The next thing she knew, the 2 men had taken off, and Lee was on the ground.
When she gets to him, she sees how bloodstained he is. She lifts his head up, kneels down, puts it on her lap.
Tracy basically holds Lee in her arms while he dies.
Coming up, a public appeal for Lee's killer produces surprising results.
And all I want to say is, please, will the driver of the car just come forward?
In the early morning hours of Monday, December 2nd, 1996, Tracy Andrews sat in a hospital room on the outskirts of Birmingham, England. Just hours earlier, her fiancé Lee Harvey had been stabbed to death on a country road, apparently after an altercation with another driver.
Here was a road rage incident which had ended up in a murder.
Tracy had also been beaten in the attack.
She tries to stop it, but the other guy punches her. She had bruises and cuts around her face.
So when West Mercia Police Detective Brian Russell took her statement that morning in the hospital, he didn't hope for much more information.
Normally, all I would do was take a series of notes, bearing in mind that the person is likely to be in shock, is likely to be traumatized.
Tracy, however, seemed surprisingly composed for someone who just watched her fiancé die.
It was only because she seemed so undisturbed, so settled. I built the statement there and then.
Tracy elaborated on what she'd said earlier at the scene. The whole thing started not long after they left the pub.
She says Lee started swearing and looking in his mirror and on about the car behind.
Tracy described the car as a dark-colored Ford Sierra.
This vehicle came alongside the Ford Escort. There was some shouting from the occupants inside, an attempt to pull in front but didn't quite make it because of a vehicle coming the opposite way.
Had someone followed them from the pub? Tracy said she didn't know. But she did say the other driver stayed tight on the back bumper of Lee's, racing his engine and blowing the horn.
They were chased for about 3 miles through country lanes.
The chase Tracy described had been so frantic that Lee had even missed the turn that led to her apartment.
Lee Harvey had overshot the lane, reversed, and then done a left-hand turn.
Moments later, according to Tracy, the chase was over.
Eventually, the Ford Sierra gets in front, and forces Lee off the road.
They ended up stopping in this quiet lane, and the two occupants of the car got out, and the passenger, who was, according to Tracy, a fat man with staring eyes, stabbed Lee. And then they got in the car and drove off.
The police immediately issued an APB on both the car and the mysterious man. Meanwhile, detectives also scoured the crime scene for clues.
When it became light, we planned search areas and that sort of thing for the possible weapon.
That afternoon, however, the search had turned up no car, no suspect, no murder weapon, and no witnesses.
It was important to check everything that she was saying, but we bottomed out, as they call it.
So the police decided to try a different tack.
They wanted Tracy to do a press conference.
It's so very well someone like me going on and saying, ladies and gentlemen, can you help? But quite clearly when someone sees the situation, they're more inclined to think, oh, well, I do know this, so I will give it a ring.
The next day, Tuesday morning, before the press conference, Detective Inspector Brian Russell took Tracy out to retrace the route she and Lee had taken home, starting at the pub.
I was making notes of what she said. Turn left here, turn right here. This is where the car came in behind us. This is where they overtook us.
By the time they got back to the police station, the media was already waiting.
Well, it's pandemonium, you know, that every member of the media was there and sort of clamouring to get near her.
The fact she's blonde, you know, she was in her early 20s. I suppose these were all factors which made it appealing for the press.
For the British press, Tracy was more than just a witness or victim. She was the tragic star in a tale the headlines had already dubbed the road rage murder.
Road rage was all the vogue at the time.
The spotlight was so intense that even Tracy, who thrived on attention in the pub, started having second thoughts.
She said, I can't do it. And I said, you are the only witness that was there. I said, like, basically, we need your help and we need to get to the bottom of this.
Tracy finally agreed. With cameras flashing all around her, she told the press what she had told the police the day before.
She was covered in bruises, she had stitches above her eye. She looked like she'd really been beaten up.
We were just followed and chased along the lanes. It was a case of both Lee and the other person were like playing cat and mouse with each other.
She ended with an appeal for the driver of the car to come forward.
Whoever this person is that was with you, you obviously know him. But he's ruined my life, and he's ruined the lives of Maureen and Ray. And please, just tell us who he is. She's
very tearful, and she begs, you know, anyone with evidence to come forward, and it appears an extremely tragic case. She looks like a young lady who's lost the man she was going to marry.
Within 24 hours of Tracy's public appeal, West Mercia police were flooded with calls from all over England.
There were people coming forward saying, I saw this car, I saw that car, I saw this individual.
One by one, every lead was investigated, and every one led to a dead end.
It seemed they were drawing a blank. Nothing or no one seemed to fit.
On Wednesday morning, Detective Russell paid Tracy a visit at her mom's house. She'd been staying there since the night of the attack.
It would have been as my role as their contact, the family's contact with the investigation, making sure that she was okay, seeing how she was in terms of trying to get more information from her.
Tracy's mom met him at the door and took him back to Tracy's room. When she didn't answer his knock, Detective Russell went in and found her half-conscious on the bed. He immediately called for an ambulance.
I was concerned that she had taken an overdose.
He was right. And as Tracy was taken to the hospital, Detective Russell worried that they might lose their only witness to a savage murder.
We needed her, selfish as it sounds, we needed her to be alive to make sure that we could catch the person who committed the murder.
Tracy survived, but her suicide attempt made headlines around the country.
The public were sort of devastated for her because it looked like, you know, she couldn't stand to live without her fiancé.
But within a few hours of her suicide attempt, the British police suddenly had reason to wonder, was it really an act of grief? Or did Tracy Andrews have another reason for wanting to end her life? On Wednesday afternoon, West Mercia detectives finally received the phone call that would lead to a break in the case.
The chap knew the car, and when he saw it in the paper, he got in touch to say, I saw that car.
So what made this particular call stand out? For starters, the car the caller remembered wasn't the Sierra. It was Lee's Escort.
He was quite a bit of an aficionado on Ford Escort, strangely enough.
According to what the caller told police, on the night of the murder, he and his girlfriend had been sitting at a T-junction waiting to turn when Lee's Escort had shot past them.
And they record him stopping, putting the car into reverse, and then sort of reversing to the junction they were at and driving past them on the opposite side of the road.
It fit perfectly with what Tracy had said in both her original statement and when detectives had re-driven the route.
She'd given clear and specific directions on that route. This is where we overshot the junction.
But then, after corroborating much of what Tracy had told police, the couple's statement took its own sudden, unexpected turn.
They were able to tell the investigation there was no other car there.
There was no vehicle coming along that section of road pursuing that Escort whatsoever.
According to Tracy, the killer's car had been in hot pursuit when they missed the junction. Had she made a mistake? Or had she lied? Either way, the couple's statement brought Tracy's entire story into question.
It was the first challenge in evidence. That was the first part of her account that didn't correspond. She had to be considered now as a suspect.
Coming up, the police confront Tracy with the new evidence.
She bowed her head, and she just gave off some signals that I thought, this is it, she's going to go.
On Wednesday, December 4th, 1996, 27-year-old Tracy Andrews was in the hospital for the second time in 3 days. The first time she had been treated for shock after the brutal murder of her fiancé, in what the press described as the road rage murder.
But this was really the first time it appeared an angry incident on the road had led to somebody being murdered. And I think it frightened people, you know, it struck a chord.
This time, however, it was Tracy's life that was in danger.
She had taken an overdose, and I understand it was quite a bad one.
While recovering at the hospital, her fiancé's parents were among her first visitors.
I visited her most days at the hospital. She was still full of like the drugs and feeling the after effects of the overdose that she took.
At one point, a groggy Tracy grabbed Maureen's hand.
And she squeezed it and she said, I'm sorry. She said, I'm sorry for what I've done. My husband's nudged me and he said, that's the news you're going to get, to a confession.
To Lee's father, Tracy's apology amounted to her taking responsibility for his son's murder. But Lee's mother reserved judgment, telling her husband not to get ahead of the police.
I said, no, let's just wait. Let's see what happens. Let the police do the work.
Little did Maureen know that the police were beginning to come around to her husband's way of thinking. The same day Tracy attempted suicide, 2 witnesses had come forward who had seen Lee and Tracy's Ford Escort just moments before Lee's murder. But it wasn't so much what they had seen as what they hadn't that concerned investigators.
There was no vehicle chasing that Escort.
And that then cast doubt on everything that Tracy had said about a pursuit, about a road rage incident.
Was their key witness also their prime suspect? Detectives went back over Tracy's statement, comparing it with all the evidence gathered to date.
We had an open mind. It could be that we were wrong. Maybe Tracy was really innocent. We were always ready for that possibility. But actually, as the evidence developed, it never pointed away from her. It just seemed to strengthen against her.
For one thing, as Tracy had described it, she'd been on the ground, knocked down by the other driver when Lee was stabbed. And she'd only reached him after his attackers had gone, getting blood on her clothes by cradling Lee in her arms as he died. But the more police studied the evidence, the more it indicated a different scenario. According to the forensic pathologist that examined the evidence from the crime scene, the distinctive pattern of blood on Tracy's sweater could only have come from an arterial spray.
Lee had a severed carotid and jugular vein, so he would have been spurting blood.
It's like a fountain, but very short-lived because so much blood is expelled at such velocity that the human body loses a lot of its blood content very quickly.
It sprayed out until the pressure went down. It was about 60 seconds.
But if the spray of arterial blood only lasted 60 seconds, how could Tracy have gotten it on her sweater if she'd only rushed to Lee's aid after the killer's car had sped away?
Her account to the police of when she actually went over to the victim after he'd been attacked by someone else was well after that arterial spraying would have subsided.
She clearly was closer to that than she indicated.
Taken alongside her discredited story of the pursuing Ford Sierra, the implications were obvious to the police. A mysterious man didn't murder Lee. Tracy did. By Friday morning, the prosecutors agreed with the police. They had enough to arrest Tracy on suspicion of murder.
You rely on your witnesses, you rely on your forensic investigation, you rely on your timings. Once that picture was starting to be built, she didn't have much of an escape route, really, and it was all closing in around her.
But one thing was missing: the murder weapon. Along with wounds from a blade, the autopsy had also revealed small double pricks in Lee's skin.
What's the sort of weapon that can both have a blade and have scissor points?
Police suspected he'd been stabbed with a Swiss Army knife.
We did extensive searching for the weapon, covered or ground on both sides of the road for quite an extensive area.
A lot of rubbish was recovered, but never recovered the murder weapon.
Would the missing murder weapon prove fatal to the prosecutor's case?
And we had to have an explanation. How did she get rid of it?
Detectives pored over the forensic evidence, hoping to discover how Tracy had ditched the knife. But would they find it in time for trial? The police appeared confident.
Detective Superintendent Johnston made the decision that she would be arrested on suspicion of the murder.
Around 11 a.m. on the morning of December 7, 1996, police officers met Tracy Andrews with handcuffs and an arrest warrant as she left the hospital.
The moment she's well enough, the police swoop and place her under arrest.
And it wasn't until she was sitting in the back of a police car that a startled Tracy learned she'd gone from potential witness to prime suspect.
Superintendent Johnston played his cards very close to his chest.
And as Tracy was transported to the police station, Superintendent Johnston called on Lee's parents and informed them of the arrest.
The jigsaw was coming together, and it was horrible. It was still horrible thinking that Lee had died at her hands.
Maureen Harvey could no longer deny the awful truth. But would Tracy? The detectives were hopeful that once confronted with the evidence against her, she would own up to the murder.
I wanted to go back to Ian Johnston and say, she's coughed it, boss, which is a term we use for a confession. She's rolled over and she's told us exactly what happened.
But when they got Tracy in an interrogation room, the chances of a confession didn't look good.
She had 2 solicitors present during the interview, two defence lawyers sort of think, well, that's almost unheard of in British interviews.
Not that Tracy's tag team of attorneys allowed for much of an actual interview.
If the male solicitor didn't interrupt during the questioning, then the female solicitor did, and it made it very, very difficult.
Even when Tracy did get a word in, she didn't make the detective's job any easier.
She didn't actually say anything really when confronted.
Not that the detectives didn't try.
She was challenged regarding the accuracy and the truth of her account, and clearly the suggestion put to her that she was the person who stabbed him.
Tracy's story didn't change, even when detectives informed her they had a witness who'd seen Lee's car, but not the mysterious Ford Sierra that had supposedly pursued them.
Her story stayed the same even when confronted. It stayed the same.
Finally, one of the other detectives sitting in on the interrogation said something that seemed to get through.
He just sort of made a comment about, this isn't going to go away, Tracy. She bowed her head, and she just gave off some signals that I thought, this is it, she's going to go.
Tracy asked to speak to her lawyer alone. They consulted for 45 minutes before calling the detectives back into the interview room.
I was quite sort of excited, you know, there was an air of expectation.
Detectives sat down, prepared to take a full statement. And they got one, just not the one they were hoping for.
She said, basically, I'm not going to tell you anything else. I'm sticking to my story. I'm sticking to the answers I've given you.
Coming up, when the case goes to trial, a shocking courtroom revelation leads to a showdown.
She turned on me and she pointed and she went, I want her out. I want her out of here now.
On July 1st, 1997, 27-year-old Tracy Andrews walked into the Birmingham Crown Court, flanked by her mother and stepfather. It was 7 months to the day since her fiancé, Lee Harvey, had been stabbed to death, and Tracy was about to stand trial for his murder. Since the night of Lee's death, Tracy had maintained that her boyfriend had been killed in a random act of road rage. Prosecutor David Krigman conceded that Tracy's version of events was true, in a way. Lee's death was the result of rage, but the rage had been Tracy's. And it had been touched off by the same altercation that had left her bruised and battered on the night of December 1st, 1996.
Clearly something took place between them two in the vehicle, and he may well have lashed out and struck her with the back of his hand or that sort of thing.
Krigman claimed that the evidence would show that Tracy had struck back, but not with her fists.
It wasn't just one stab to the heart, it was 37 stab wounds.
The pathologist described the attack as frenzied because of the number of wounds and the location.
But what had launched Tracy into a frenzy that particular evening? For an answer, the prosecution called several neighbors who testified to overhearing a loud argument between the couple hours before Lee was killed. And it had been, as the English say, a regular row.
Throwing things at each other. I think the telephone had got thrown, the TV maybe had got thrown. They'd obviously been having a serious domestic dispute between themselves on that day.
They were already rowing on a sustained and very high volume level earlier in the day.
And the argument continued off and on until much later that evening, according to the testimony of witnesses who saw them at the pub.
For whatever reason, they'd gone out for a drink, and that clearly hadn't made the situation any better.
They sit in the pub and barely said a word to each other, and fellow drinkers could tell that all was not happy in the Tracy and Lee camp.
Next, prosecutors called the couple who had seen Lee's escort moments before the murder.
They never saw another car.
So far, the evidence showed that only Tracy had motive and opportunity to kill Lee that night. But what about the means? If Tracy had stabbed Lee, why hadn't police found the murder weapon at the crime scene?
The knife had disappeared. It had completely evaporated into the ether.
Just before the trial, we're still racking our brains about how did she get rid of the murder weapon?
The answer, the prosecution claimed, was that Tracy hadn't ditched the murder weapon at the crime scene. She had done it at the hospital.
Once it's out with hospital waste, there's absolutely no chance of it being recovered.
How did Tracy supposedly manage to smuggle the knife into the hospital with the crime scene crawling with police? The answer, according to the prosecutors, lay in Tracy's boots. Or more specifically, the curiously shaped bloodstain inside one of them.
It fitted in size and shape. The Swiss Army knife that we're fairly, well, certain that she used.
That young woman sat in the kitchen of one of the key witnesses after the event, sat with the police, sat in the hospital, sat with her family, sat with the nursing staff, with the murder weapon still on her.
On July 10th, Tracy's defense barrister began laying out his case. His first witness, Tracy Andrews.
She was quite calm and composed, and she spent 5 hours just trying to tell her version of events.
She was detailed, she was consistent, she was calm, she presented herself well.
She told the jury that she had never deliberately lied to the police, but the stress of the situation may have affected her memory.
She just brushed it off by saying, I can't remember. Don't remember that bit.
But what about the testimony that contradicted her account? How did Tracy answer the eyewitnesses who said there'd been no Ford Sierra chasing Tracy and Lee?
She said they must have been talking to each other. The woman had her eyes closed in the passenger seat. They missed it.
And when the prosecutor asked Tracy if it was Lee who had left her face bruised and battered that night, she adamantly denied that he had even struck her. She told the jury their fight earlier in the day was nothing compared to the ones they had had in the past, and none of those fights ended in murder. On the contrary, she and Lee had always come back together, stronger than ever.
They always made up. I think they enjoyed the making up as much as they enjoyed the arguing.
To illustrate her point, she told the jury about one of the most painful episodes in their relationship, the events surrounding her pregnancy the previous fall. But she added a detail that shocked at least one person in the gallery, Lee's mother, Maureen.
They had a fight. She basically threw him out of the flat, and she decided she didn't want to be a single mother, so she had an abortion and then told everyone it was a miscarriage.
When I heard that she'd had an abortion and she hadn't had the miscarriage, now I just gasped and said, oh, the bloody liar.
And for the first time, Tracy's composure slipped.
She turned on me and she pointed and she went, I want her out. I want her out of here now.
The judge let Maureen stay in the courtroom, but when it came time for Tracy's cross-examination, the prosecutor seized the opening offered by the outburst.
He basically dissected her story, piece by piece, and showed how it couldn't have happened. And of course, I think she did the worst thing possible that she could in the witness box. He got her riled up, he got her angry, and of course that anger blazed. The jury could see that.
It became apparent in the way she answered that this was a woman who had the capacity to do something as brutal as that which she did.
On July 28th, both sides gave their closing arguments. It was now up to the jury to decide if Tracy was guilty or innocent of Lee's murder. Coming up, will Tracy's angry testimony prove her undoing, or will her heated outburst temper the jury's response?
Provocation in English law reduces murder to manslaughter.
On the morning of July 29, 1997, Tracy Andrews sat in Her Majesty's Crown Court in Birmingham, England, waiting to hear her fate. Prosecutors claimed she'd stabbed fiancé Lee Harvey to death during a heated argument that also left Tracy battered and bruised. Now it was up to the jury to decide. Did Tracy do it? And if so, did her actions add up to murder?
The judge, as was his duty, said if they found that she in fact did kill him, then they were entitled to consider provocation, which in English law reduces murder to manslaughter.
After 5 hours of deliberating, the jury announced it had a verdict.
It was probably the longest 5 hours of my life.
As the jury came into the courtroom, Lee's parents weren't the only ones feeling the tension.
The court was just still for a moment. There was sort of electricity. Because I don't think people were certain what the verdict would be.
The jury foreman stood up to read the verdict.
The court clerk says, have you reached a verdict? The foreman says yes, and the court clerk said, what's that verdict? And the foreman says guilty.
Tracy showed no reaction to the verdict.
She was sitting there with her head bowed, looking at the floor.
The judge gave her the only sentence English law allowed.
There is only one sentence for murder. Life imprisonment.
For Lee's parents, the verdict meant justice for their son's killer.
And just sighed a sigh of relief and just hugged each other and just said, thank God it's over and we can put Lee to rest now.
But for many, even though Lee Harvey's murder was solved, Tracy herself remained a mystery. Why did she persist in the road rage story, even when the evidence was overwhelmingly against her?
If she'd have said, he hit me, it would have given the opportunity to say, I didn't really, I was acting in some form of self-defence, and we may have been looking at a trial, but we may have been looking at the issue, is it murder or manslaughter?
She was a fool, because if she'd admitted that they'd had a row and it went horribly wrong, she probably wouldn't have done the life sentence that she's doing now.
A devoted police officer mysteriously disappears.
When he didn't show up for his shift that day, people started wondering where the heck he was.
For answers, investigators turn to the missing man's longtime girlfriend. But when they discover that she'd also vanished, police assume the worst.
It was an off and on type relationship.
One marred by more than just the occasional breakup.
My brother and I would hear screaming. She had bruises on her face.
Fearing the tempestuous relationship had finally come unraveled, police embark on a frantic search. But will they find the missing couple in time?
His holsters are there and both his duty weapons are missing.
Or will they be too late?
I just remember hearing some lady's voice. She says, well, honey, there's a bullet in your head.
Few officers on the Little Elm, Texas police force were as dedicated as 38-year-old Wayne Irby.
He was very meticulous and detailed, and he was eat up with law enforcement.
If you were breaking the law, he'd write you, and we used to tease him. He was so hard that he'd write his own mom a ticket.
Therefore, it was quite a surprise when Wayne missed roll call at 6 a.m. on December 10th, 2004.
That wasn't Irby. He was always punctual.
Worried, Wayne's coworkers tried to contact their missing friend.
He had called his cell phone numerous times, and it even went over and knocked on his door several times.
And when police attempted to contact Wayne's girlfriend, Denise, they learned she was also missing.
They had talked to her kids at their school, and their mom had not come home the night before.
I tried to call her, and we tried to call Wayne. Neither one of them was picking up the phone.
The dual disappearances sent police on a desperate search. Among Wayne's co-workers on the Little Elm force, it was common knowledge the couple had a troubled relationship.
There were some jealousy issues involved.
They'd been fighting back and forth.
But if police were right and Wayne and Denise had butted heads again, 2 questions remained. How bad would it be? And if push finally did come to shove, who would fire first? Fresh from a divorce and new to the small Texas town of Little Elm, love was the last thing on Denise Miller's mind in 2002. But that all changed with one knock on her door.
I went to the door and I saw a police car and I became a little nervous.
There was no need to be nervous. The officer merely wanted to introduce himself to the new homeowner on his beat. And before leaving, he also offered Denise a little advice.
He was telling me that I should let my garage down because burglars have the tendency to climb in through the garage and travel through the attic.
A single mom struggling to raise 2 teenagers, Denise appreciated the gesture, particularly when it came from an officer like Wayne Irby.
He was sharp, well-groomed, his uniform was well-pressed and badge shined.
A 4-year veteran of the Little Elm Police Department, Wayne was the prototype Texas lawman.
He was very proud to be a police. He always wanted to be a policeman.
He was very meticulous in detail. He loved his job.
But over the next few weeks, Denise realized that Wayne's interest in her was more than just professional.
He would start calling me and ask me to go out and eat with him and hang out a little bit, so we did that.
A divorced dad, Wayne was an immediate hit with Denise's 2 teens, Walter and Whitney.
When I first met Wayne, I really liked him a lot. He was fun to be around, and he was funny. He was a kid at heart himself. He listened to the music they listened to. My kids loved being around him.
With her kids' unanimous approval, before long the couple's romance turned serious.
She was real sweet, real quiet, but she was real nice.
It seemed like a perfect couple.
But were Denise and Wayne really a couple? Or was she just one of the many women Wayne was involved with?
He was somewhat of a ladies' man.
Wayne had a lot of friends that were girls.
Denise didn't care for Wayne's roster of lady friends or his roving eyes. But when she confronted Wayne about his flirtatious ways, he had a ready explanation.
Wayne would always say, I get paid to look. What he meant that was that as a police officer, he was getting paid to be observant.
But did he do more than just look? According to his reputation around town, Denise certainly had reason to suspect so.
At one time, Wayne did do a lot of running around. He would just draw women. You know, he was like a magnet, and he just dated a lot of women.
Denise didn't like this. They had a lot of problems, jealousy issues.
Although according to Wayne's friends, the problems were mostly Denise's.
She was a very jealous person, and she was very jealous of our friendship.
If he talked to someone that was of the opposite sex, she would get upset about that.
was upset, and she was there to tell the officers that she had been assaulted by Wayne Irby.
And she'd apparently taken a beating.
She had bruises on her face, maybe even a cut lip.
At first, Little Elm police took Denise's allegations seriously.
We took the offense report.
They called Wayne in and talked to him.
And when Wayne came in to talk to his superiors that afternoon, he'd obviously been in a fight too.
He has some bruises and scratches on him and stuff.
But according to what Wayne told his fellow officers, he hadn't started the fight. Denise had.
She showed up and saw the purse there, and she went nuts.
He just told me she jumped on him.
All Wayne had done, he said, was defuse the situation.
He ended up putting her on the ground and sitting on her to get her to calm down.
Denise, according to Wayne, had eventually calmed down. She hadn't forgiven him, though. At least that's how Wayne's co-workers interpreted her assault allegations.
It was a false report. She was trying to get him in trouble.
False or not, in the end, no charges were filed.
She came in a few days later and wanted to drop the charges and said that he was a good officer and she didn't want to see his career hurt.
She finally broke down and said, no, I set it all up, and there was nothing to it.
Regardless of who'd actually started the fight, the bruises faded and Wayne and Denise eventually reconciled. They started dating again and even shopped around for a house.
We took his mom and my mom over to a house that we decided to purchase. And we told them that when we get in the house, we will get married because I did want to do it right.
Wayne's proposal never came, however, and Denise started wondering why. Was Wayne seeing someone else on the side?
She kept accusing him of the same thing over and over and over.
She tried to keep constant tabs on him, too.
He would be out on an accident, and he would go back to his vehicle and say, look at this, she's called me 60 times, wanting to know where I'm at and what I'm doing.
And when Wayne and Denise were together, things only got worse.
My brother and I, we would hear screaming, we go downstairs and knock on the door, and, they'd be like, no, we were just laughing, and you could tell that they were lying.
By October of 2004, Denise's jealousy finally became more than Wayne could take.
He said that he was moving out. He just said that we were bumping heads.
Wayne told Denise he had already rented a new house. She was devastated.
We'd wake up in the middle of the night and see her crying and rocking on the floor.
And by November, Denise received her second rejection in as many months. She lost her job.
She got even more depressed, and everything just kind of went downhill from there.
Unemployed, alone, and afraid of losing her home, Denise turned to Wayne for help.
Wayne, out of compassion and caring for her and her two children, moved back in with her to help her out through her financial issues.
But would the couple's reconciliation lead to a second shot at love, or something far worse? A week after moving back in with Denise, Wayne Irby missed the morning roll call at 6 a.m. on December 10, 2004.
He was punctual every day. There wasn't a day that he didn't show up to work or he was late or tardy.
There was still no sign of Wayne when roll call ended a half hour later. So as the Little Elm officers left the ready room and started their shifts, they conducted a brief search for their fellow officer.
They went to the address that Wayne and Denise had shared together. He wasn't there. His car wasn't there. No sign of him there.
A patrol car also drove by the rental house Wayne had moved out of a few days earlier, a house Wayne still held the lease on.
His vehicle wasn't there. There was no sign of him there.
There wasn't any trace of Denise either. When police called her house, Denise's two teens told them that they hadn't seen her in more than 24 hours.
My mother had not come home. That's very unusual. She always comes home. She's never done that before.
And despite the fact that her children had repeatedly tried to call her, Denise had never answered her phone.
They said they had not been able to contact her, and she always has her cell phone with her. She always keeps it on, especially when she's away from home.
Whitney told police that after multiple voicemails, her mother had finally called them back a little before midnight.
And she was like, I'm out running errands. I'm just calling to say I love you. And that was weird.
Weirder still, Whitney said their mother didn't answer her phone when they'd called her again the next morning. And the cops wanted to know why. Was she unwilling? Or was she unable? Coming up, a chilling clue has police scrambling for answers and victims.
They found a note in the house that said, "Please forgive me and continue to pray for my soul."
At 9:30 a.m. on December 10th, 2004, officers of the Little Elm, Texas Police Department pulled up outside the home of Wayne Irby and Denise Miller. Irby, a 6-year veteran of the Little Elm Force, had missed that morning's roll call.
He was supposed to show up at 6 a.m. and it was kind of strange when he never showed up and didn't call, because whenever he was sick or something, he would call the sergeant and then he'd call me.
They knew that if Wayne doesn't come to work and if Wayne doesn't call, that something's wrong.
Wayne wasn't answering his phone either.
If he see my number, he always called me back. And when he didn't call me back, and I kind of figured something, but I didn't know what.
There was just a weird feeling about it. And the more that time had transpired, the worse that feeling got.
And Wayne's girlfriend Denise, as her teenagers had informed police, was also missing.
It's unlike my mother to not contact my brother and I for like more than 2 hours. You know, she's always calling.
The kids had said she hadn't come home that night. They'd actually gotten up, dressed themselves, got themselves ready, and gone to school.
We went to school, and it was just like the longest morning. And they called me into the office when it was like third hour. It was one of his fellow police officers, and they were asking me if I knew where they were.
Whitney Miller had no idea where her mother or Wayne could be. Neither did her brother. By then, police were becoming very concerned.
We went over to his and Denise's house looking for any signs of anything, find out where he was.
The house was empty. Police, however, did find a disturbing clue in the master bedroom.
They found a note in the house that they believed Denise had written that said, "Please forgive me and continue to pray for my soul."
She said she was tired of hurting and letting other people hurt her.
But what exactly was the letter insinuating? Discussions with Wayne's family offered a suggestion. Just one day earlier, he'd left Denise a second time.
I knew that they were having troubles. He had mentioned about going to move back into his homes.
He just told me she just keep bringing things up from the past and she just won't let it go. So I'm moving out.
Armed with the information that Wayne had once again moved out, his colleagues decided to pay another visit to his nearby rental house.
We checked all the windows around the residence, but the blinds were down. You couldn't see inside the windows. It didn't appear as if anybody was at home.
Was it just an empty house, or was it a crime scene? There was only one way to find out.
I went over to wherever the leasing agent was for that house and talked with her. She called the owner of that house, and he ended up meeting us at that house with the keys.
Keys in hand, officers finally entered Wayne's residence.
As soon as we entered the door, there's the kitchen bar, and there's some items sitting on the bar. One was his cell phone. The other was a fanny pack that he carried with him everywhere he went.
The find filled Wayne's fellow officers with a sense of dread.
They implied to me that Irby was in this residence.
Passing through the kitchen, Officer James Wynn found Wayne laying face down in the hallway.
I rounded the corner to the left, and that's when I saw him laying in the floor.
He immediately rushed to his friend's aid. it was no use. Wayne Irby was dead.
I went to check it for a pulse, and that's when I saw it appeared to be a bullet wound to the back of the head.
Who had fired the fatal shot? Police didn't have to look far for an answer.
On the counter, there was a note, and it was written by Denise Miller.
And this note, unlike the cryptic one police had found earlier at the home Denise and Wayne once shared, wasn't a prayer request. It was a confession.
One side said, I did it, I took our lives, call our mothers. The other side of the note said he was the best police officer that you had.
Our lives, our mothers. Did that mean she'd killed herself and Wayne? If so, why wasn't she lying dead on the floor alongside him?
The main gist of what I saw was that she had killed him and then gotten scared and ran.
The search for Wayne Irby was over. Now, police were focused on catching his killer.
They start looking for her. She's immediately a suspect.
We put out, an all-points bulletin to surrounding agencies to be on the lookout for her.
While Wayne's body was being transported to the Tarrant County Medical Examiner's office for autopsy, police returned to the couple's home with a search warrant. There was still no sign of Denise, but the authorities did make an ominous discovery.
His holsters are there, and that's when we really determined that both his duty weapons are missing.
Wherever she was, Denise was apparently armed.
At this point, I think she's a danger to other officers. We put out the teletops to other agencies to make sure that if this vehicle is spotted or she's spotted, they know what she had done and take caution.
Would the caution be necessary? It all depended upon who Denise was more of a danger to, the police or herself. At just past 4 a.m. on December 11, 2004, the night manager at the Ramada Inn in Gainesville, Texas, received an unusual call from a guest in room 106.
The lady saying that she had fallen and needed some help getting up. She stated she didn't need an ambulance, she just needed some help getting up.
Finding the door deadbolted, the manager ordered a hotel maintenance worker to break into the room.
When they entered the room, of course, they saw that the blood on the mattress, the sheets on the floor.
And also on the floor was a critically injured woman. Paramedics and police arrived within minutes of the hotel manager's call to 911.
There was a firearm in plain view sitting on the table, and what I immediately assumed to be a suicide note.
Despite the suicide note, the woman lying slumped on the floor was still very much alive.
She kept telling me that she had just fallen down and she just needed help getting up, and she kept reaching her arm out, asking me to help her up. I asked her what her name was. She never would tell me what her name was.
Judging by her injuries, it was a miracle the woman could even speak at all.
She did have an obvious gunshot wound to the right side of her head. Her right eye was bulging out.
Paramedics rushed the woman to the North Texas Medical Center. While she was en route, police back at the hotel made a positive ID on the mystery woman.
The manager provided us with the registration card. And my corporal, he read the name Denise Miller, and he looked at me and he said, I think that's the suspect in that shooting.
I was relieved, of course, to find out my mother was alive, and not exactly okay, but she was alive.
Coming up, police figure they've caught Wayne's shooter. But will she remember pulling the trigger?
Denise, can you tell me what happened in Little Elm last night?
Yeah, okay.
You know Wayne's hurt, right?
I don't think so.
In a Gainesville, Texas hotel room early on the morning of December 11th, 2004, Denise Miller had put a pistol to her head and pulled the trigger. Wanted for the murder of her boyfriend, Wayne Irby, it appeared to be the last act of a desperate woman whose life had spiraled badly out of control.
People were being laid off in her job. She was extremely depressed because it was a combination of her job and Wayne, and it was just too much for her.
News of Denise's suicide attempt quickly reached detectives in Little Elm.
Gainesville found out who she was. They identified her and they contacted us.
I kind of thought that we might get a call a little later on that maybe she had done something like that because she had indicated in one of her notes that I took our lives.
She'd almost succeeded, too. Gainesville police informed their counterparts in Little Elm that Denise was in the emergency room of an area hospital.
She shot herself in the temple, and the bullet actually missed the majority of the brain, went around and lodged on the opposite side of her head.
I don't know if she flinched at the last minute, not wanting to do it, or if it was just the lack of firepower she had. I'm not sure, but nonetheless, she failed.
The evidence Gainesville investigators had recovered from Denise's hotel room, however, suggested she'd fully expected to die that night.
There were several blister packs of sleep aid in the trash can, and I remember they were mostly empty.
One of Wayne's missing service weapons had been recovered from the hotel room, the other from Denise's car parked outside. Neither, however, appeared to be the suicide weapon. Instead, police figured the gun Denise had used on herself was the .25 caliber automatic pistol they'd found lying on the hotel room floor.
I think she had originally wanted to try to commit suicide with the .40 caliber being the larger caliber gun.
But that plan had apparently gone awry.
She either was intoxicated from the sleeping pills and the alcohol or wasn't familiar enough with the gun to know how to load it. The bullet had been loaded into the chamber backwards, which of course prevented the gun from firing and jammed it.
And lying beneath the jammed handgun, police had also found yet another suicide note.
She said that she killed him accidentally. She freaked out and she ran.
While Gainesville police were wrapping up the crime scene at the Ramada, investigators from Little Elm walked into the North Texas Medical Center to try and get a statement from Denise.
There's a lot of medical intervention going on. She has a neck brace on. She's on a backboard. I can tell her eyes very severely swollen.
Despite her traumatic injuries, Denise seemed coherent. After reading Denise her rights, Ranger Murphy turned on a tape recorder and questioned her about the events of the past 24 hours.
Denise, can you tell me what happened in Little Elm last night?
Nothing.
Nothing happened? You know Wayne's hurt, right?
I don't think so.
You don't think so? And how come you left a note there telling me what happened to Wayne?
I don't know.
She was able to remember things that happened before the offense, appeared to remember some things later on that happened after, could not remember what happened immediately surrounding the offense.
However, when pressed, Denise did admit to being in Wayne's rental home on the day of the shooting.
Did you see him there at his new house last night?
Yeah.
What happened there, Denise?
We argued.
You argued? About him moving out?
Yeah.
Then what happened?
I don't know.
She admitted to me that she did have an argument with Officer Irby, but denied shooting him and even denied shooting herself.
With an obvious bullet wound and 2 notes implicating herself in Wayne's death, why would Denise suddenly deny her own involvement? Was she lying? Or was there perhaps another possibility?
When she shot herself in the head, the area of her brain that it damaged was the one that would control that memory.
After being questioned by Ranger Murphy, Denise was sedated and airlifted to a Dallas trauma center. And when she woke the following morning, Denise appeared to have amnesia.
I don't know where I was at. I just remember hearing some lady's voice. I couldn't see anything. Some woman said, "Honey, why did you shoot yourself?" I said, "Ma'am, I didn't shoot myself." She says, "Well, honey, there's a bullet in your head."
That same bullet had also left Denise partially paralyzed and blind in her right eye. But that pain paled in comparison to the shock Denise was about to receive from her daughter.
I said, "Whitney, I need to talk to Wayne." I had to break the news to her that he was no longer living. I said, "Whitney, quit playing." I said, "I need to talk to Wayne." She says, "Mom, no, really, Wayne is dead." I was totally confused, and it's like everything was spinning.
Whitney couldn't bear to tell her mother exactly how Wayne had died, however. It wasn't until hours later that a nurse inadvertently brought Denise up to speed.
He says, "You've been on the paper?" He said, "You've been on the news. They said you shot your boyfriend, a police officer."
While Denise struggled with the truth, investigators were busy solidifying their case against her. On December 13th, police received Wayne Irby's autopsy report. The medical examiner's findings showed Wayne died from a single .25 caliber bullet.
The gun that was used was the same gun that she used on herself that was found in Gainesville. That was ballistically matched to the projectile taken from Wayne's head.
But where exactly had the .25 come from? To the police, it appeared unlikely to be Wayne's.
.25 caliber weapon is a small weapon. It's not used in law enforcement.
Running the gun's serial number, police discovered that the pistol was registered to Denise's stepfather. So how did it wind up in Wayne's rental house to fire the fatal shot? To police, the answer appeared obvious: Denise.
Bringing the gun to the scene pretty much tells me that she had ill intentions.
She was a control freak, and she wasn't getting her way. It wasn't going how she wanted it.
On January 18th, after 38 days of rehabilitation and recovery, Denise received her release papers at the hospital.
This guy came, and I noticed he had handcuffs and he had a badge. And he came in, and I believe he read me my rights.
When I picked her up and served the arrest warrant, she came across as a shadow of her original self. She was sitting in the wheelchair. She was slumped over, not speaking, and she wasn't the same person.
Police immediately loaded Denise into the back of a waiting police car, and not just any cruiser.
They put me in Wayne's squad car, and the reason I know it was Wayne's squad car is because he kept it immaculate. And he always had this incense, the same incense, and I could smell the incense.
It was, according to Denise, no coincidence.
The police officer kept driving, and he kept looking in the rearview mirror at me, smiling.
Was this covert act of vengeance a harbinger of things to come? At her arraignment on May 2nd, 2005, prosecutors charged Denise with murder. And based on the evidence contained in her chain of suicide notes, they were fairly certain of a conviction.
We had a very strong circumstantial case to begin with that was only bolstered by the fact that she had confessed not once, but twice in those notes.
Coming up, prosecutors have a strong case against Denise. But with her in a wheelchair, half blind and partially paralyzed, will a jury decide she'd suffered enough? In the spring of 2006, more than a year after she was charged with the murder of her boyfriend Wayne Irby, Denise Miller met with her court-appointed attorneys at the Denton County Jail. Despite suffering partial paralysis and apparent amnesia from a self-inflicted gunshot wound, a psychological evaluation had found Denise competent to stand trial.
She understood the charges against her, and she understood what a judge was, what a jury did, and she understood all that, so there was nothing to prevent her being tried.
But would the case actually go that far? In the weeks leading up to her trial, the Denton County District Attorney's Office had been working on a deal that would offer Denise a reduced sentence of 20 years in prison in exchange for her guilty plea.
We were aware of the fact that Miss Miller was now in a wheelchair and that there could be an issue of sympathy.
The question now was, would Denise take the prosecution's offer? The answer was no.
In my mind, I don't recall what happened, but I just would not deliberately do something like this.
She said, "I love your son," and she said, I just can't remember.
She didn't want to plead guilty to something she couldn't remember.
Which, depending on how you looked at it, was either a drawback or an unexpected benefit.
She couldn't talk to her attorneys the way normal clients can talk and convey what had happened. But on the flip side, I did believe that jurors would find her somewhat sympathetic because of her physical limitations, her mental limitations, and just her lack of memory of this event.
Still, her attorneys would have a lot of explaining to do if Denise hoped to avoid a potential life sentence. Denise may not have remembered the shooting, but she had already confessed to it in a series of suicide notes.
Aside from the notes, we had other strong circumstantial evidence, and we had the fact that she tried to kill herself.
Little wonder that the mood around the defense table was decidedly grim when proceedings began at the Denton County Courthouse on July 10, 2006.
I like to think I'm optimistic, but going into the trial, I didn't really think that she had a chance of getting off. It was just a lot against her.
In their opening statements, Denton County prosecutors wasted no time laying out their case. They described Denise Miller as a jealous control freak that couldn't take no for an answer. And when Wayne threatened to leave her for good, prosecutors alleged Denise killed him.
She went over there with the full intent of if she couldn't have him, no one could.
And prosecutors asserted there was plenty of circumstantial evidence to back up that claim.
The gun ended up belonging to her. She left notes at the scene. She went somewhere and tried to kill herself after killing him.
Denise's defense team, in their open, didn't dispute the state's claim that Denise had killed Wayne. However, they argued that his death was simply a tragic accident. Defense attorneys pointed to her suicide note, written just moments before Denise had put a pistol to her head and pulled the trigger.
This is somebody's dying declaration. And right there in the note, there was a sentence that said, I shot him or killed him accidentally.
If you're going to kill yourself, why would you write a lie right before you died?
For prosecutors, the challenge was obvious. Prove that contrary to the defense's claims, Denise had very deliberately shot Wayne Irby.
This was not an accident. Denise had taken that gun, because that was her gun that she used, was not Wayne's. She had taken that gun over to the residence.
Worse for Denise, according to a report from the Texas Department of Safety Crime Lab, there was no way she could have pulled the trigger by accident.
We had the trigger pull tested on the gun, and it took 4.5 to 5 pounds of pressure to pull that trigger, which is fairly substantial when you're considering, one finger.
Next, prosecutors called the Tarrant County medical examiner to the stand. Wayne's injuries, according to his testimony, also argued against an accident.
She couldn't have hit him better if she tried. It was a dead-on shot to the back of his head from a fairly short distance away.
But the most damning evidence, prosecutors contended, were Denise's own actions in the immediate aftermath of the shooting.
If you truly accidentally shot somebody, the first thing you would do is call for help. And she never did that. She fled.
But what about Denise's multiple suicide notes? Prosecutors urged jurors to judge the body of the work and not one line possibly taken out of context. According to prosecutors, the first note, the one found in Denise's house and most likely written before Wayne was shot, clearly indicated Denise was preparing to do something drastic.
In the first letter, she doesn't mention anything about an accident.
And while the note in the hotel room did say the shooting was an accident, that wasn't all it said.
It also contained references to I did a horrible thing, thou shalt not kill. The rest of even that note contradicted the fact that it was an accident.
Finally, rather than focus on the wheelchair-bound woman sitting at the defense table, prosecutors urged the jury to remember just who the real victim was in this whole tragedy.
I think the prosecution did an excellent job of reminding the jury that this pitiful woman sitting before them is in that condition by her own hand.
She's the one that chose to murder Wayne Irby, which then caused her to choose to shoot herself.
On July 12th, Denise's attorneys rested without calling any witnesses.
They couldn't put her on the stand because she doesn't remember it.
But in their closing statements, the defense also turned to Wayne's autopsy report to bolster their contention Denise hadn't intended to kill Wayne. After all, if Denise was indeed the bitter, scornful lover that prosecutors depicted, then why, defense attorneys argued, hadn't the shooting been more malicious?
There was only one shot. He was not shot multiple times.
And how exactly had the pistol gotten into Denise's hands? Since their client claimed she couldn't remember the shooting, defense attorneys could only speculate.
My theory was she didn't think it was loaded.
And as the defense reminded jurors, Denise had even managed to load one gun backwards. And guns, as the defense reminded jurors again and again, were only one of the many things Denise didn't know anything about, including the crime she was on trial for.
I don't remember if it was day, I don't remember if it was night, I don't know what day it was. I don't know what I did the day before, I don't know what I did that morning. I don't even know if he and I were together that morning. All I know is what people tell me.
She was completely disabled. She won't be able to work. She was in a wheelchair. She had very limited cognitive ability.
Denise was, in effect, all but helpless, unable to even take the stand in her own defense.
There was no use in putting her up on the witness stand to say, I don't remember, I don't remember, I don't remember.
Coming up, which will weigh more on the jury's mind? The case against Denise or her disabled condition?
She was so incapacitated at this point, I didn't think that the jury would see her as a continuing threat to society.
The murder trial of 40-year-old Denise Miller concluded on July 12, 2006. Charged with the death of her boyfriend, police officer Wayne Irby, it was now up to a jury to decide if she was guilty of the crime. It was, even as the jury filed back into the courtroom with a verdict, something Denise herself was unsure of.
She had tried to commit suicide and shot herself in the head. She had absolutely no memory of the case.
It just seemed like a major nightmare.
A continuing threat to society.
I was looking forward to receiving probation, but, not knowing.
It began as a weekend fling with an old flame.
She said we had an affair. Yes, it was once. That was it.
But when the affair ended, the stalking began.
You have this woman that is causing all these problems.
Acts of vandalism, letters and harassment.
We're all terrified of her. She's unstable. She could do anything.
And when the harassment turned to violence...
The first thing I noticed was the bullet hole.
Police were soon on the stalker's trail.
It's really his own fatal attraction situation.
But this time, the story would be updated with a 21st century twist.
When you use a computer, it leaves tracks or electronic fingerprints behind.
At 4 in the afternoon on June 10, 2007, 42-year-old Ann Stout walked into the bedroom of her home outside the small town of Darby, Montana. She was looking for her husband, Bill, and she found him.
She finds Bill laying on the bed on his side. There's blood.
Ann immediately dialed 911.
I just got home, and there's something wrong with my husband. There's blood, and his eyes are all bruised, and he's cold.
Bill Stout was dead, killed by a single gunshot to the head. But whose finger had been on the trigger? Not Bill's, judging by the crime scene. The gun that had fired the fatal bullet wasn't clutched in his cold hand, or even in his bedroom.
That's a big concern, that you have a gunshot injury and you don't have a firearm in the area.
But who would want to murder Bill Stout? Questioned at a neighbor's house, his widow quickly gave police a possible suspect.
Her name is Barbara Miller.
Ann told police that Bill had had a brief fling with Barbara, and that Barbara had not been at all pleased when Bill broke it off.
Ann claimed Barbara Miller had been sending emails, unsolicited, threatening emails to Ann and Ann's children.
Ann and Bill's sons also told investigators about the other woman.
They told me that Barbara Miller could be a suspect.
She was sending all of us emails, all me, my brother, my mom, my dad. It was really creepy, you know, just, I don't know, really freaked me out.
And according to one of his sons, Bill Stout had been freaked out too.
He told me that his dad was extremely concerned because a pistol of his had recently gone missing.
Had Bill's jilted lover killed him with his own gun? Barely an hour into the investigation, the signs were already pointing the detectives in that direction.
We had a viable suspect right off the bat.
But the deeper they dug, the more detectives would find themselves asking, was something about this Hollywood-style fatal attraction a little too scripted? "20-year-old single mom Ann Busain first caught Bill Stout's eye when she took his breakfast order at a Prunedale, California cafe in the early 1980s.
I think he was really impressed with Anna because she's really outgoing and very witty, you know. She always has a laugh for you.
In July of 1985, the hardworking builder took on 2 new jobs, husband and father to Ann's 3-year-old son, Ben.
Bill not only loved my sister and took her in, but also took Ben as his own child.
The family continued to grow. Ann gave birth to son Noah in 1988 and Matthew 2 years later. In 1995, Bill decided to relocate the family to Montana.
Bill was just in the thought of, hey, that would be great if I could just, get away from this crazy California life, get up there in the wild, live out in the middle of nowhere.
The family bought 20 acres outside the small town of Darby and started building their dream home, complete with horses in the pasture and a Harley in the garage.
Bill was your stereotypical Western Montana man, tough, worked with his hands.
My dad liked to hunt. Definitely in the summers we'd go fishing sometimes.
Ann, meanwhile, made sure her sons excelled in school.
She knew all my teachers, knew all my friends.
The Stouts seemed to have it all. 3 growing boys, a picturesque home, and a loving marriage.
They were in love. It was embarrassing to me that my parents would be touchy-feely.
But just after New Year's in 2000, the family's happiness was shattered by the death of Ann's eldest son, Ben.
He had committed suicide after he finished his first semester of college at the University of Montana.
Ann and Bill seemed helpless to comfort each other.
They grieved in different ways. Bill didn't talk about it, and Anna needed to talk about it.
She had to undergo counseling and she had medication.
The combination of counseling, medication, and time eventually dulled Ann's pain. But the tragedy took a tremendous toll on Ann and Bill's marriage.
After that
year, there was, I don't know, a lot more sniping going on. And I think everyone's always looking for someone to blame.
It created maybe a lack of communication between the two of them.
And in May of 2005, Anne discovered just how serious the lack of communication in her marriage had become.
She gets a phone call from a woman who doesn't identify herself but advises Anne that Bill is having an affair.
She had confronted him. At first he denied it. After a while, I guess he did admit it.
It had all begun barely a month before, when Bill traveled to Arkansas to attend an old friend's wedding alone. At the wedding, Bill had been reunited with another guest, a woman named Barbara Miller.
She was a romantic interest in Bill's youth. I believe they were in high school, maybe a first love.
I had not seen him since I broke up with him, 30-some years prior.
Bill and Barbara had spent the whole weekend getting reacquainted.
They spend the weekend together in his motel room.
We talked about how we missed each other and we wished that things had been different and regrets, but that we couldn't go back, but we could start fresh.
But what about his wife? Bill had told Barbara that his marriage had been in trouble for years.
He did say that they were separated. I was led to believe that he'd already talked to a lawyer.
After Bill returned to Montana, he and Barbara had kept in touch.
Bill had given her an address for a post office box in Hamilton that Ann Stout knew nothing about.
They had even made plans for a romantic getaway at the end of May.
Bill and I had planned a trip for me to come up there to Montana. He sent me some tickets, and I was going to go on a vacation there.
But when Ann confronted Bill about the affair, he agreed to end it.
He said he would no longer see her again.
Bill canceled Barbara's plane tickets. Then he sent her an email ending the month-long relationship.
It was just very blunt, just, like a Dear John letter, if you will. Just, I made a mistake.
As far as Bill was concerned, the affair was over. But would Barbara agree? Her initial response to Bill's email certainly didn't sound like it.
I thought, I'll show you. So I emailed him and I said, think again, I'm gonna be there.
More emails and letters followed.
He starts receiving letters threatening to come to Montana and accuse him and pull out this affair in public.
Bill's friends and family also started receiving strange emails from someone calling themselves Freak of Arc.
I had received an email. It had said that Bill was keeping secrets and Ann will be out of the picture soon.
I showed it to Bill, and he just shook his head. He said, Mark, this is a crazy woman.
But was Barbara crazy enough to follow through on her threat to come to Montana?
His wife had received some calls from Barbara, or a person that she believed was Barbara. The calls came from a local Hamilton, Montana phone number.
He becomes nervous and anxious and worried.
Ann did more than worry. She contacted Barbara's employer about the harassment.
She had complained that I was using my work computer to contact her family and threaten them.
Barbara denied the accusation, and when the threatening emails continued to arrive from Freak of Arc, Bill Stout went to the Ravalli County Sheriff on August 12, 2005.
He made a report to me about some possible stalking activity from an ex-girlfriend, Barbara Miller.
Bill would soon have even more to report. Early the next morning, he discovered his truck had been vandalized in the driveway.
I could hear my parents yelling about it, and my mom saying, put the gun away. That's how frightened my dad was. There's a 911 call.
My car just got egged. I filed a complaint against somebody today, and they just egged my truck.
He believed that Barbara Miller was responsible for that. The deputies responded, and they were not able to find anyone in the area.
Sheriff's deputies wrote up a report, but the incident wasn't enough to trigger a full-blown investigation. Still, over the next year, the emails, phone calls, and the occasional act of vandalism continued off and on.
There's really this paranoia in the house. We're under the impression that she's unstable, that she could do anything.
In spite of the frightening fallout from the affair, Ann and Bill seemed determined to get their marriage back on track.
We were in Montana a year after the affair, and it was a great time, and I felt they made it. They made it back. They're happy again, and they were.
But their happiness wasn't destined to last long. On Saturday, June 9th, 2007, Ann and Bill Stout settled in for a quiet evening at home. Ann grilled steaks for Matthew and Bill. Matthew left to hang out with friends at a bonfire after dinner. And with son Noah out of town, Ann and Bill had the house to themselves.
She and Bill watch a movie. They then make love.
Early the next morning, Ann and Matthew left Bill in bed while they went to Missoula to run errands.
They get back at the house at 4. She and Matthew bring the groceries into the house, and she's yelling around for Bill to come help her.
When he didn't answer, Ann went into their bedroom.
She opens the door of the bedroom. She finds Bill laying on the bed on his side. There's blood.
Moments later, the Ravalli County 911 Center received a frantic phone call.
My name is Ann Stout, and I just got home, and there's something wrong with my husband. There's blood, and his eyes are all bruised, and he's cold.
Coming up, after months of thefts, threats, and vandalism, had Bill's stalker finally struck.
Her involvement in this case was something that we started working on immediately.
At around 4:30 on the afternoon of June 10th, 2007, the Ravalli County, Montana 911 Center received a frantic call from the home of Ann and Bill Stout. Ann, as she explained to the dispatcher, had just discovered her husband lying in a pool of blood.
Is he conscious? No! I mean, yes! And what's not breathing anything!
Within minutes, an ambulance arrived at the home.
The body was laying on the bed, facing away with a pillow partially covering the head.
But they were too late. Much too late.
They don't run a strip on him. They don't put any kind of sensors on him. They can see that he's obviously dead.
And the detectives quickly discovered the cause of death.
The first thing I noticed was the bullet hole in his head.
There was a very obvious wound to the head that was possibly a suicide.
7 years after his adopted son's suicide, had Bill Stout also taken his own life?
I could see one hand above the covers. The gun was nowhere around that hand. The other hand was under the covers. After I documented the scene as I found it, I checked that hand and the gun wasn't there.
Which immediately suggested one thing to the police.
There wasn't a firearm present. So that was a giant concern for us in that it might not be a suicide.
Had Bill Stout been murdered? The lack of a gun near the body, along with the 9mm shell casing police found under the pillow, certainly pointed to a homicide.
A dead person can't hide a gun.
But if Bill hadn't shot himself, whose finger had been on the trigger? That evening, while police secured the crime scene, Detective Perry Johnson interviewed Ann at a neighbor's house.
She's quite composed. She's able to talk. She's not hysterical. She's not weeping or sobbing or any of that.
Did Bill have any problems with anyone?
No, he got along well with everybody, but he had an affair a couple of years ago.
Just hours after finding her husband's body, Ann informed police that he'd cheated on her. Naturally, the admission led directly to the detective's next question.
How did you handle that affair?
I love Bill very much, but I don't think I really trusted him again, and I think he knew that.
Ann went on to explain that Bill had ended the affair and that she and her husband had been trying to patch things up. But the other woman, according to Ann, didn't take Bill's scorn lightly.
She tells me during this first interview that, there are some issues.
The woman, according to Ann, had stalked Bill. Ann told police the stalker had regularly sent the family threatening emails, harassed them with frequent phone calls, and even stolen Bill's gun. At least that's what he'd suspected.
He has a gun that he filed a complaint with last week that was stolen, and that was our handgun.
He filed a complaint last week.
Yeah, at the sheriff's department.
Do you know what kind of gun?
I only know it's called a Beretta, but I don't know what kind.
He came to the sheriff's office and said, look, I don't know if this gun was stolen or not, but I can't find it. And I've had problems with this Barbara Miller. She possibly took my gun.
And the stolen pistol just happened to match the caliber of the shell casing found under Bill's pillow.
It was a 9mm Beretta handgun, probably one of Bill's favorites.
Was it the murder weapon? And more importantly, who was this other woman who'd supposedly stolen it?
Her name is Barbara Miller.
Did that mean Bill's old flame might have been involved in his death? It was certainly starting to sound that way. Without tipping off their potential suspect, sheriff's investigators started making inquiries.
Her involvement in this case was something that we started working on immediately, exploring what her whereabouts or her activities for the day before and of the murder.
One task remained, however, before police considered Barbara a prime suspect rather than a mere person of interest. They had to rule out the people closest to Bill. That night in the neighbor's garage, the detectives asked Ann to walk them through the weekend before Bill's death. According to Ann, her husband had spent Saturday afternoon riding his motorcycle.
What time did he get home?
Late. Because I was already cooking Matthew's dinner, and it was light. Because I seen him drive up when I was outside barbecuing.
Ann said they'd all sat down to a steak dinner, and then she and Bill shared a quiet evening at home.
Matthew went to a bonfire.
Okay.
Then it was kind of nice, just the two of us. It was nice.
The next day, according to Ann, Bill had slept in while she and Matthew had gotten up early and gone to Missoula.
We went to the Walmart, and then from Walmart, we went to the mall.
The trip itself may have been ordinary, but the return home was anything but.
They've been shopping, so they start carrying their groceries into the house. She says, I call out to Bill, hey, we're home. And then she says, I go into the bedroom and I find Bill's body. And she said, I hollered for Matthew that we have to leave.
Questioned by the police that same night, Matthew confirmed his mother's statement, starting with Saturday's dinner.
I think it might have been some steak. There might have been a salad or something. I don't eat vegetables.
According to Matthew, he'd last seen his father alive at dinner. He told police that his dad was already in bed by the time he got home from the bonfire and had slept in the next morning while he and his mom went shopping in Missoula.
We left into the house at about 8:15, 8:30. My dad was sleeping.
Matthew also confirmed Ann's account of their shopping trip.
After Walmart, went to the mall. Then after the mall, we'd drop off some clothes and things at the Goodwill.
Matt's right there. He's with her the whole time.
Receipts recovered from the Stouts shopping bag strengthened the alibi. All police had to do now was send investigators to Missoula to see if it checked out. In the meantime, detectives secured a warrant and started combing the Stout residence for clues. Sheriff Chris Hoffman was passing through the garage when something about Bill's motorcycle caught his eye.
The saddlebag was unlatched. That was unusual. I mean, not terribly out of the ordinary, but for me it would be, and for most of the people that I ride with.
But if the unlatched flap piqued the sheriff's curiosity, it was nothing compared to what waited inside.
He calls other officers over there, and they find a pistol in that saddlebag.
It was a 9mm Beretta.
The same make and caliber as the one described as stolen.
Police suspected it was also the murder weapon. But if the Beretta had been used to kill Bill, would the shooter's print still be on the gun? the police weren't hopeful. And the reason had to do with a crucial clue that the detectives had found in the Stout's laundry room: a single latex glove.
The latex glove was found buried halfway in her laundry hamper.
Had the killer worn the glove?
The glove that we recover out of that laundry basket, we submit to the crime lab and we process it for gunshot residue and DNA.
But would the results confirm what Ann and her sons apparently assumed, that Barbara Miller had killed Bill Stout?
This Barbara Miller character, we're all terrified of her.
Coming up, what had started as an open and shut case of fatal attraction suddenly gets complicated.
We're starting to get an idea that possibly Bill's death was much earlier than what we had assumed.
On Monday morning, June 11, 2007, it had been less than 24 hours since Ann Stout called 911 and reported finding her husband Bill dead in their bedroom. Police already had a suspect, however. Both Ann and her son Matthew had pointed the finger firmly at a woman named Barbara Miller.
They told me that Barbara Miller could be a suspect if it was a homicide.
An old high school sweetheart of Bill's, they'd reunited for a brief affair 2 years before his death. But when Bill had ended the affair, according to Ann and Matthew, Barbara apparently hadn't taken the rejection lightly.
They were very concerned, telling me about strange, stalking type behavior they believed was coming from Barbara.
There were various emails sent to Bill Stout. There were also letters that were received by different neighbors of the Stouts and friends of the Stouts.
And if Barbara was Bill's stalker, didn't it stand to reason that she'd had something to do with his murder? The police weren't sure. For starters, how did she get into the house? There were no signs of forced entry or a struggle.
The television was on. The house seemed pretty together. It wasn't all disheveled.
The crime scene wasn't entirely clean, however. Someone had left one potentially critical clue behind.
When we went into the laundry room, we recovered a glove.
While the medical examiner took Bill's body to the morgue for autopsy, sheriff's deputies sent the glove off to the crime lab for DNA analysis. But would the results confirm that Barbara had been the shooter? The next morning, going over the evidence gathered at the scene, the detectives began to have their doubts. For starters, there was the 9mm Beretta that investigators suspected of being the murder weapon. Bill had reported it stolen just over a week before his death, a theft he blamed on Barbara Miller.
Bill told me that he had had a brief affair with her and that since the affair he's been having continuing trouble with her, and that's why he believes she's the one that was in his house.
But if Barbara had stolen the gun in order to shoot Bill, why had the police found it stashed on Bill's motorcycle?
I don't ever remember working a firearms theft where somebody stole a gun and then brought it back and put it somewhere else.
And if Barbara didn't ditch it at the scene, how did it get there? What if the person who'd stolen the gun wasn't Barbara? Suddenly, the whole stalking story was starting to sound suspicious to police, and very convenient for Ann.
That's the trail that Ann herself sent us down. This is, clearly what she wanted us to be working on.
There was, however, another trail the investigators could follow. The trail of phone calls, letters, and emails that Bill believed had come from Barbara. The investigators seized the Stout family's 3 computers.
I received the computers, the letters, the facts as the sheriff's office had developed them, and told to take a look.
While the forensics experts tried to crack the origin of the mysterious emails, the detectives went straight to the alleged source. On June 12th, after getting a call from Montana police, Arkansas authorities paid Barbara Miller a visit.
The Crawford County police came out to talk to me. After the interview started going, it became a little more intense, like about my whereabouts. Then I finally asked, am I a suspect? And I think The way they worded it was like a person of interest.
Barbara admitted sending one email threatening to come to Montana, but she told detectives it had been an idle threat made in the heat of the moment.
I had no intentions of going. I was angry because he didn't call me. I thought that would have been the big thing to do.
Not only did Barbara deny being Bill's stalker, according to what she told investigators, Ann had spent the affair's aftermath pestering her.
She'd call me periodically to check on me and pretend to be my friend and see what I was doing.
Police couldn't help but wonder why Ann would contact Barbara if Barbara was the one supposedly stalking her family.
She introduced us to Barbara Miller and this situation with her husband.
Was Ann deliberately creating a smokescreen to conceal the killer's true identity? If so, who was she trying to protect? Noah had been out of town, and Ann and Matthew had been caught by traffic cameras on their way to and from Missoula, confirming their alibis. So while her behavior toward Barbara Miller was suspicious, how could she be a suspect when she was in Missoula at the time Bill was shot? During the autopsy on June 11th, the medical examiner found the answer in an unexpected place: Bill Stout's stomach.
There was steak and broccoli and possibly some potatoes.
It was, based on what Matthew Stout had told investigators at the scene, the meal they'd shared on Saturday night.
It might have been some steak. There might have been a salad or something. I don't eat vegetables.
But if Bill had been killed sometime on Sunday while Ann and Matt were shopping in Missoula, why would Saturday's dinner still be in his stomach?
The next day, those items should not be in his stomach at all. So we're starting to get an idea that possibly Bill's death was much earlier than what we had assumed.
That's certainly what the medical examiner thought.
The steak led him to believe that Bill Stout had died no later than 11 o'clock Saturday night.
In other words, he'd been shot right in the middle of the window of time and admitted she'd been alone with Bill.
Matthew went to a bonfire.
Okay.
Then it was kind of nice, just the two of us.
Who's got access to Bill after he eats steak and broccoli? Ann Stout's got access. Ann Stout's the last person, by her own admission, that ever saw Bill alive.
Sheriff's investigators asked Ann to come in for a few questions. When she walked into the interrogation room at the Ravalli County Sheriff's Office on Friday, June 15th, she wasn't alone.
She came into the interview with an attorney.
Did Ann know police considered her a suspect? Detective Johnson did his best to put her at ease. He opened the interview by going back over the details of her earlier statements. Walking her through the dinner she'd shared with Matthew and Bill the night before, he casually brought up the menu.
Okay, so there's baked potato, broccoli, and steak.
Bill, by Ann's own admission, had eaten broccoli for dinner. Of course, Detective Johnson already knew that. He told Ann as much.
We've got two medical examiners that took a look at this. They told me what Bill had for dinner.
And the detective hinted Bill's last meal wasn't all the medical examiners had been able to tell him.
They could determine some things as a result of their examination, and one of them was time of death.
What was his time of death?
Well, actually, I wish that you would tell me that.
Oh, God.
I would like to work through this with you.
You are asking me a question that I don't have the answer for.
Well, actually, I think that I'm asking you a question that you don't want to answer.
Oh, gosh.
Detective Johnson had just, in so many words, informed Ann that she was the prime suspect in her husband's murder. Next, he pressed for a confession.
What actually happened the other night?
I don't know what you're asking, or I'm not sure what you want me to respond.
Well,
here's
what I would ask you to respond. I'll tell you that we will if you want, work our way through all of this. But I'll tell you also that the results of our investigation show that you killed Bill.
They do not show that. They do not prove that, and you do not know that, because it did not happen.
I can assure you that I do know. I can tell you that I know the time of death. I can tell you that we recovered the firearm.
But the harder Detective Johnson pressed, the more adamant Ann became.
You may not be lying, but you are not informed. I did not do that.
Ann became so agitated that her attorney eventually stepped in and stopped the interview.
No, it wasn't like that.
Well then...
Oh, no, you have it so mistaken.
No, I don't have it.
Yes, you do. Please, you have it mistaken.
Talk to her off tape for just a couple minutes.
You bet. Her attorney asked me to be able to speak to her alone. I left the room, and when I came back in, he told me that he didn't want me to ask her any more questions.
There was only one thing left to do. As the officers prepared to cuff Ann, she panicked.
He is going to take you in custody.
Oh, God! I'm not that tough. Please. I didn't even think I needed an attorney. Please. You have to take me into custody. You know where I'm at. I'll give you my passport. I have it. You can take any physical object. You can release me to somebody's custody. You don't know me. You don't know me.
Ann?
What?
You're under the arrest for the murder of Bill Stout.
Coming up, explosive new evidence seems to confirm what Ann maintained all along. The stalker killed Bill. But who was the stalker?
I found what seemed to be a smoking gun, which was a simple phrase of, "Welcome, freak of ARC."
On June 2nd, 2008, Ann Stout walked into a Ravalli County, Montana courtroom to stand trial for the murder of her husband, Bill. It was 8 days short of a year since she dialed 911 to report finding her husband dead. In the interim, even since her arrest, family and friends had rallied around Ann in support.
We all knew in our hearts, there's no way Ann did this. There's no way. I mean, it's not possible.
Why wouldn't they believe Ann was innocent? After all, most of Bill's friends had been well aware of the trouble he'd been having with an ex-girlfriend named Barbara Miller.
You have this woman that is causing all these problems, sending all these emails, the eggs on the truck, the phone calls.
But who exactly was the woman causing all these problems? According to the prosecutor's opening statement, it wasn't Barbara Miller. The prosecutor admitted she'd had an affair with Bill, but she didn't kill him. In fact, according to the prosecution, she didn't even stalk him.
And basically stalked and terrorized her own family.
It wasn't a single incident. It wasn't limited to him. It involved his sons. His family and friends were aware of it. Bill was humiliated.
It was, prosecutors claimed, supposed to be the perfect cover.
This was a woman who was playing a victim, but in turn took an honest man's life.
To prove Ann murdered Bill, first they had to prove she was his stalker. On June 4th, prosecutors called computer forensics investigator Jimmy Wegg to the stand.
Ann Stout claimed that Barbara Miller sent emails, the threatening emails, to the Stout family using an email address of Freak of Ark, meaning, of course, Freak of Arkansas, a Yahoo email account.
Agent Wegg had led attempts to trace the origin of those emails.
In combing through all of these unused areas or sectors of the system, I found what seemed to be a smoking gun, which was a simple phrase of "Welcome, freak of ARC," because "welcome anyone" is the greeting we receive when we log on to our Yahoo account.
But did that necessarily mean the Freak of ARC emails were actually from Ann? On cross, Wegg couldn't say.
I could not testify as to who was sitting at the keyboard, and that's true in almost every case.
But prosecutors could prove who definitely wasn't sitting at that keyboard: Barbara Miller. On June 10th, Barbara took the stand for the prosecution.
As the trial progressed, and we keep hearing Barbara Miller, Barbara Miller. She's not what I expected. She's a smaller woman, very nice, soft-spoken.
Barbara certainly didn't look capable of murder. And in this case, her appearance couldn't be deceiving. There was no way Barbara could have shot Bill.
We were able to absolutely eliminate her as someone that did this.
How? The night Bill was murdered in Montana, security cameras recorded Barbara in a Walmart checkout line. An Arkansas Walmart.
They brought the videotape. We saw them. Here they are pushing the cart out of Walmart on the night that he was murdered.
Barbara told the jury she hadn't spoken to Bill since the affair ended, and she said she'd had good reason to stay away. Not only had Ann been terrorizing her own family, she had also been pestering Barbara.
She would just, out of the blue, call me every 3 months. I just didn't know what she wanted. I just didn't know why she was calling me.
As Barbara's testimony continued, Ann made no attempt to disguise her emotion.
It was as if you could see these dark, rumbling clouds building and building inside of Ann.
Had the affair made Ann angry enough to commit murder? The prosecution believed so. And while they didn't have her fingerprints on the murder weapon, the prosecutors could still offer jurors direct proof that put the gun that killed Bill into Ann's own hand. The crime lab report on the latex glove recovered in the Stout's laundry room.
We get a result back that's positive for particles of gunshot residue.
The gunshot residue suggested the killer had worn the gloves in order to keep fingerprints off the gun. However, according to the lab technician's testimony, the killer's plan hadn't worked out.
The glove was found with Ann's DNA on the inside and Bill Stout's DNA on the outside. If that's not enough of a red-handed "I did this," I don't know what is.
On June 11th, the prosecution rested. That afternoon, Ann Stout's attorney started presenting her defense. It had been a year and a day since his client had found her husband Bill's body. But that was all she'd done, according to the defense. But if Ann didn't kill Bill, and Barbara couldn't have, who did?
Our pathologist said that it looked more like suicide. Everything that he saw clearly indicated, including the autopsy photos, that Bill had shot himself.
The theory, as the defense reminded jurors, matched the first impression of the police at the crime scene. But police had ruled it out because the gun wasn't in the bedroom near the body. Had they been too quick in their judgment? Could there be another explanation?
Somebody came along and moved the evidence.
Someone was shocked enough to change the scene because of how hard it was for Ann when Ben died. They didn't want her to go through the same trauma.
But what about Ann's DNA on the inside of the glove and the gunshot residue on the outside? According to the defense, it only proved Ann had worn the glove.
It didn't demonstrate that Ann had worn the glove to shoot the gun. Someone who may have moved it out to the garage could have had that glove on.
On June 12th, Ann Stout took the stand in her own defense.
The courtroom was pretty well packed. Everybody's wanting to hear what's going on. What is her side of the story?
It was a sad story that Ann's attorney walked her through. The loss of a son, Bill's infidelity, his death, and her subsequent arrest.
She was trying to convey to the jurors that I'm a real person. Look at me, I'm just like you. These terrible things have happened to me, and look at the person that I am, and I would never do this.
She seemed scared and nervous, a worried, very insecure, very sad woman.
Ann had reason to be scared. When her testimony ended on Friday, June 13th, 12 jurors were all that stood between Ann and life in prison. Coming up, the verdict.
The jury gets called in pretty early, and my mom is, obviously worried. I mean, she's just terrified.
Bill Stout had been dead for little more than a year when the jury retired to determine whether his wife, Ann, had killed him. Charged with deliberate homicide, she faced up to life in prison if convicted. But first, the jurors had to decide which Ann was the real one, the deranged stalker, or the quiet, demure woman sitting at the defense table.
It was a lovely mother, a devoted wife, a mother of 3 kids, active in the community, versus a very malicious, vindictive, alone and hurt woman who chose homicide as her way to manifest her emotions.
On the afternoon of June 19th, after 8.5 hours of deliberation, the jury announced it had reached a verdict.
The jury gets called in pretty early, and my mom is, obviously worried. I mean, she's just terrified.
Moments later, the court clerk read the verdict. Guilty.
I expected her to fall apart, put her hands over her face, cry. She just stood there.
Was she resigned to her fate, knowing what she had done? Or was Ann simply stunned by the fact that her life had taken yet another tragic turn?
She's just so gone in shock that, I don't think she has any idea what's going on.
Noah Stout is still struggling to accept the jury's verdict. But one thing remains certain. Ann is his mother, even if she did kill his father.
I'm not saying that she's innocent. I'm not saying that she's guilty. I'm just saying that she's my mom. I'm going to support her because she's my mom.